Looking for Trans Wonderland Travels in Nigeria, which I wrote 5 years ago, and it's chronicling a trip I took around Nigeria. I'm talking about social hierarchies and how they are the antithesis of synergy. And I think that because we always have to have an elite and who rule over the masses, that ultimately it doesn't just hurt the people at the bottom, but it hurts the people at the top as well. And now we're living in a world that's much more complicated. We have serious problems like climate change, changing demographic structure and environmental damage. And we really need people to maximize their intellectual potential in order to solve these problems. We can't rely on just a small minority.
Hello again. So synergy is when two or more people or organizations combine their efforts to produce an outcome that's worth more than they would achieve separately. Now, by this definition, social hierarchies are the enemy of synergy. But we humans, we love to organize ourselves into social hierarchies. Ever since we stopped being hunter-gatherers, we've lived in societies where you have an elite at the top and masses at the bottom. And this elite have always found ways, they've always developed different belief systems to justify their position. Whether it be the caste system in India, or trickle-down economics, where they tell you that the rich can get richer, and those at the bottom will benefit as a result, or religious doctrines such as the predestination of Protestant Calvinism, which tells you that when you're born in this world, God has already decided whether you're going to heaven or hell when you die. And these sorts of belief systems have justified slavery and all other types of exploitation. And I think it's holding us back as a species. And I think the greatest symbol, visual metaphor of social hierarchies is this. The Egyptian pyramids. You've got the apex at the top, and then you've got the broad base at the bottom. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with pyramids. I mean, on the one hand, I think they're incredible. They're 5,000 years old. The smallest bricks at the top weigh 20 tons. The ones at the bottom weigh 80 tons. People put this together, whether they're skilled laborers or slaves, we don't know, but they put this together without the help of machinery. And I find that utterly incredible. It represents what's so great about the human species. It's ingenuity, coordination, ambition, hard work. But at the same time, you think, well, thousands of people worked on these structures without being paid. A lot of them would have died. And what for? Just to bury one man or one woman. It's a disgrace. And yet somehow we forget about the context in which these buildings, these structures are made. And we flock there in our millions to marvel at them. Now, can you imagine if you tried doing that today, in this day and age? Can you imagine a leader such as Donald Trump saying, okay, demanding that, working class Americans build a monument for him? It would be a skyscraper in this day and age, made out of gold, no doubt. And, we wouldn't accept that. We would find it completely outrageous. But you know what? Even if he managed to pull it off, within a century, people would have forgotten about the injustice of it all, and we would just be flocking to enjoy the fruits of someone's megalomania. Now, we should ask ourselves, what is it that made these people build these structures in the first place? It's weird, because when you ask a poor person in this day and age or in ancient times, what do you want when you die? They say, I want paradise, I want to go to heaven. But it's funny how all these leaders, these pharaohs, these kings, these emperors, they always seem to be on the defensive. They want possessions or sacrificed human beings to come with them in these tombs to protect them in the afterlife. And, that tells you something about their mindset. They know that being at the top of this social hierarchy isn't right, that they have enjoyed life at the expense of other people. And history has taught us time and time again that if you organize your society in that way, it eventually collapses. And so, but yet, somehow, we forget about this, and we repeat that mistake again and again. And even in the last 50 years, I can give you several examples of societies where people were riding high, and then it all collapsed. And, perfect example is apartheid South Africa. Back in 2003, I stayed with an Afrikaner farmer in the Western Cape. He was a wine farmer. And someone in his position 50 years earlier had it made. They had all these basically slave workers. He would pay them a little bit of money, but often pay them in wine. And the whole community would turned into alcoholics. They were dysfunctional, but as long as they produced the wine, then everything was fine. But you cut to 2003, and basically he was reaping what he sowed, but in a completely different way. He was really struggling with his workers. He was still paying them in wine every now and then. But when they got drunk, some of them would get violent with him. And so he was constantly battling with his workers, and he would smash them over the head with empty wine bottles. And he would say, it's the only language they understand. If he fired them, they would retaliate by defecating on his premises. And so he would then spend half a day in the employment tribunal suing them. And that was his life. And his wife, and I do feel sorry for him here, his wife was murdered when their son was just 6 years old. And his whole community terrified of leaving their houses on foot. They go by car everywhere. And you think, well, he's just a wine farmer. He's not a millionaire. His ancestors fought to create a social hierarchy, and look what's come of it. And the problem is you see this not just on a national scale, but within families as well. You have these hierarchies which are really problematic. Paternalism, the sort of paternalistic society does not work. Obviously, as human beings, we are insecure. We like the feeling of having people beneath us. It gives us a sense of security. But actually, if we're smart, we should recognize that everyone around us has talent and has something that they can contribute to society. And it just amazes me that in this day and age, you can have men in certain parts of the world who, want wives who are illiterate and uneducated or undereducated. Why would you want the mother of your children to basically have no power in the world and no ability to teach your kids the skills that they need to survive in the 21st century? It was fine back in the day. 1,000 years ago, you could give birth to a child at the age of 14. You could teach them the things they needed to survive, and everything was fine. It was just a bit of farming, fishing, making clothes, not much. But now, life is changing so much. Every 15 years, the world feels unrecognizable. And to allow your children, whether it's your daughters or your sons as well, to grow up in this world without the tools to survive and to thrive in this world, I think is, it's not just an act of dereliction, but it's self-sabotaging. And there are also other consequences of this. We just had a terrorist attack in London the other day. And every time you have a terrorist attack, you'll hear politicians and journalists talking about, the community and what the community can do to stop these boys from being radicalized. But the problem is, a lot of these boys not even necessarily the terrorists themselves, but the ones who could potentially become terrorists. They come from these very paternalistic families and social structures where the mothers have no power over them. The mothers are taught that their male offspring are above them in the hierarchy. So how can these women exert any influence on these men? They can't, and they're not. And we're seeing the consequences of that. So I think it's extremely important that everyone in the world maximizes their potential. We should be prospecting for geniuses the way that we prospect for oil and minerals. And that's really not happening. And so going back to these pyramids, you look at this structure and you think, my God, it is amazing. I mean, there is some synergy involved in the construction of these things, but it's the wrong kind of synergy. It's people coming together, people being compelled to put their energy towards a project that really has no value other than aesthetic and historical. But really, what we want is that same kind of collaboration, but in a completely different way. And this is the thing I struggle to understand, is why, when you think of all the major achievements, and I should say that in inverted commas, whether it's putting the man on the moon, whether it's building the terracotta warriors in China, all of these things, they're always motivated by either militaristic aims or, in the case of the moon landings, competing with Russia in the Cold War. It just seems to me that as human beings, we can do almost anything we want, but we always seem to be motivated by the wrong things. And we have to find a way to motivate ourselves in a way that isn't militaristic. Well, it isn't to do with the vanity of one demagogue. And we've tried different means. We've tried religion as a way of compelling groups of people together to achieve a positive aim. But that doesn't work. You end up with hierarchies within religion, and then religion gets corrupted, and you have schisms, and et cetera, et cetera. And we've also tried it with a profit motive as well, which has gone some way towards achieving that. But, I don't need to tell you that, it has largely failed. There is only one thing that can motivate all human beings to work together for a common good, and that is a sense of self-preservation. We really need to understand that keeping the downtrodden down ultimately hurts us. It hurts everyone at the top as well. And so we need to maximize everyone's potential so that every child that you see can contribute something to this world. Things are becoming more complex. We've got climate change, environmental degradation, changing demographic structure, aging populations, and the possibility of superbugs. And we've become complacent as a society, as a planet. And when you think about it, the last flu epidemic was in 1918. I mean, that was less than a century ago. There's no reason why a really major superbug won't hit us and decimate half our population. We need people who can help. We don't want just an elite and that we rely on while everyone else is just sitting back and waiting for them to do something. Imagine a world where, everyone can contribute, where everyone is literate, and that no one is left behind. That's the kind of world that we want. But in order to do that, we have to value everyone. We have to get rid of these social hierarchies. And the attitude has to be that we all get all hands on deck and work together. Thank you.